Greetings, Dr. Beckett. Welcome to the Quantum Leap Podcast.
In 1995, theorizing that one could time travel within their own lifetime, Dr. Sam Beckett stepped into the Quantum Leap accelerator and vanished. After years of attempting to bring him home, the project was abandoned. Until now.
Quantum Leap was an experimental time travel program, years away from being tested.
Why did you leave?
I don't remember anything.
Your name is Dr. Ben Song. You're a time traveler from the year 2022. I'm Addison Augustine.
Addison, you're the woman I love.
Ben's working with someone.
Al Calavicci's daughter, Janice.
What is that?
That's a destination. I think that Ben was trying to leap into the future, to a specific place, a specific point in time.
That shouldn't be possible.
I remember why I leapt in the first place. It's to save you.
Janice is our best chance at understanding what's going on. It's time to roll the dice.
You want to help Ben? You will tell him to trust no one, even you.
You are listening to the Quantum Leap Podcast. This is episode 129, Leap, Die, Repeat.
Running a little behind schedule.
Yeah, everything looks good. Startup will be quick.
Ever seen one before, Colonel?
Seen what?
Just wait until you see what this nuclear reactor can do.
An experimental nuclear reactor.
Our reactor will power an entire city with
recycled nuclear fuel.
Well, it looks like you finally leaped into your element.
No kidding. Bunch of nerds gathered together for the common good. Kind of reminds me of...
Us?
Yeah. Like when we first joined Quantum Leap.
It's September 12th, 1962, the day JFK gave that famous speech about going to the moon and the future of technology.
So, does this reactor do big things for sustainable energy?
No, they shut it down.
When?
Today. It looks like Dr. Woolsey does the demonstration of the nuclear reactor, but it doesn't work, and the government pulled the funding for the program.
That sucks.
Yeah. I'm not finding a lot online. I'm gonna need Jen for this. 5 unrelated deaths. That can't be a coincidence. That sounds like
A government cover-up.
Get me back online!
4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, that's definitely not supposed to be happening.
Why is Ben flatlining? Somebody explain what's happening.
He's dead.
He's alive.
It's not possible.
running a little behind schedule. Eugene, are you feeling okay?
Yeah, sure.
Ever seen one before, Colonel?
Only in pictures. How long is this gonna take? I promised my kid I'd make it to her ballet recital.
Trust me, Colonel. It will be worth the wait.
What in Groundhog Day is this?
Welcome to the Quantum Leap Podcast, everyone. I'm Christopher DeFilippis.
I'm Allison Pregler.
And I'm Matt Dale.
And today, as usual, we're just a bunch of nerds gathered together for the common good. We'll be talking about the new episode of the new series, Leap, Die, Repeat. We'll also be bringing you an interview with one of the guest stars on this episode, Joseph DePinnacle. Am I saying that right, Matt?
DePinnacle.
Matt spoke to him, and Albie spoke to him. He played Eugene Wagner in this episode. I want to say Wagner every time I see
Wagner.
that.
It looks like it should be Wagner.
Right?
Such a cool guy. Really nice guy. And also very cool about people mispronouncing his name. He was very relaxed about it. He said, anything close is fine.
Seems like a cool guy.
Yeah, he's very chilled.
Yeah, so stay tuned. After the break, we will be bringing you that. I can't wait to hear it myself. So we continue our streak, a guest star every episode. I'm so happy that Joseph decided to come and play. I hope that someday we'll get to talk to Bob Picardo about his role as well.
Yes.
So, Bob, if you're listening, this is for you. See, I'm calling you Bob. I'm establishing rapport. I'm keeping it, keeping it light. Keeping it light.
That's too familiar. He was going to, and he's like, absolutely not now.
It's Mr. Picardo to you.
So, guys, this was a trippy quantum leap, a quantum leap like no other. Why don't we get into some initial impressions? Allison, would you like to begin?
Yeah, so this is going to be a weird one for me, guys. Yeah, I thought this was one of the best episodes that they've done. And by the end of it, I just kind of gave up. That's my initial thoughts.
All right. We'll be elaborating on that, I hope, at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Matt, how about you?
Yeah, I maybe not quite so extreme, but I'm in a similar place. There's a lot to love about this episode, a lot to love, but there's a handful of things that really got to me, and I felt similarly to how I did when I was watching O Ye of Little Faith, which is by the same writer. I came out of that feeling quite irritated that it couldn't just be consistently wonderful for me. But yeah, it does. It's a weird one for me as well.
I don't know if I'm surprised, because I know we've had varying reactions to the series, but I really enjoyed this one. I had to watch it again to just see if I could make it make sense, because at first I thought it was just kind of gimmicky, like the Groundhog Day trope comes to Quantum Leap, and I think that it's pretty ambitious, and I like the idea of them pushing the boundaries of what you can do on a leap and that kind of stuff. But all that being said, it comes down to the story, and I thought the story was okay. But I loved the lore stuff, the leap stuff, and much of the character stuff. So, yeah, and it's great, because to me this harkened back to the original series in a lot of neat ways, in my opinion. So, I mean, first off is the time loop. So, what do you guys feel about Groundhog Day coming to Quantum Leap?
Hey, I love those season 5-esque gimmicks. It sure is a gimmick, and they make the most of it. So I thought it was a really fun idea, and I like the fact that they made the most of the whole concept of let's look at the same event from different perspectives. If it had just been things about Groundhog Day, it's the same character going through the same stuff again and again, and he learns some things about himself, blah, blah, blah. This, having Ben be able to see the same thing from different angles, was a really neat idea, and I think it was really well written for that.
Yeah, just the portions with Ben were pretty good. Time loop stuff is one of my favorite tropes, so I thought that was fine.
All right. And I mean, they mentioned it once, but you guys had also mentioned it in the thread that this is more in common with a movie called Rashomon.
My mistake was thinking I was in Groundhog Day when I was really in Rashomon all along.
Which I actually watched after I watched this episode, which is a movie about 4 different perspectives on one event that happens. And I got to tell you, the movie was pretty boring. It was kind of terrible. But
I've never heard of that film, and I couldn't quite make out what he said. And obviously, we didn't have subtitles available, so I wasn't able to go and watch the film.
I mean, if you've seen any sort of thing where they're retelling the same story from different perspective, it's Rashomon. That's
okay. I don't know why I've never heard of that, but
it's a very influential film. But
tempted to go and check it out, but not based on what Chris has just said.
I've never seen it either. I just know it because it's a famous film.
It's by Kurosawa, so the cinephiles out there are surely going to, give me some hate mail. But, it was pretty melodramatic, and I'm an opera fan, so for me to say it's melodramatic, it sure is melodramatic. But that being said, I like the fact that they were doing the multiple leap stuff, and I was just, I don't know if I want to say confused, but I guess with time loop stuff, this didn't fall into the trap that most time loop episodes fall into, in my opinion, because a lot of times what happens on a time loop episode is the character is going through the same stuff over and over again, and they're learning something, but you have to reset everybody else at square one. And I find that just because of narrative demands, a lot of times in time loop episodes, what they'll do is they'll have the character growing and learning, but all of a sudden the characters that are surrounding them are also somehow different when they should be exactly the same all the time. And I admired this episode for not going down that road. But I don't know that you can say that Ben got like different perspectives. I just feel like he was going through the motions with a lot of the stuff. So I was kind of confused about, where they were going with the story, because it seemed like some of the leaps, they didn't really go anywhere. I don't know what we learned on each one.
I think he picked up something new on each one. He didn't necessarily know until the end that he'd picked something up, but I'm fairly sure if, like, even the very first leap, he doesn't learn much, except for the fact that somebody's been writing to the Colonel. He's got a letter. They're quite obscure little things that he picks up on each one, but I do think he picks something up each time. The letter and the fact that it's torn out of the notebook, that kind of comes together over, 3 different leaps that he has to put together.
Yeah, all right. And I mean, this is where, okay, I have an issue. They're saying that this was a big cover-up, a government cover-up, and the villain of the piece, who we know is Mr. DePinnacle, he says that he did it so that they would stop the plant and they wouldn't make the nuclear weapons there. They wouldn't, But isn't, like, causing a nuclear meltdown at a reactor just as bad? I couldn't understand his motivation for blowing this place up. And how does nobody know about it in the current timeline? Like, wouldn't a nuclear meltdown be big news? Like, if some plant in Texas just melted down?
It was covered up. That was the plot point.
It was covered up very well.
How do you cover that up?
That's a small meltdown.
I mean, I just that part didn't ring true to me. So I was really all right. That's what I mean. Like, some of the story beats left me a little cold, but I enjoyed the gimmicky parts of it and the leap parts of it. So I enjoyed a lot of the character work back at the project with this one. I know that it was heavy on back at the project, and I found that the project stuff and the leap stuff of just out of story necessity were gelling a lot more this time. Yeah.
There was some great character stuff back at the project, particularly I went into this episode expecting fun time loop hijinks and lots of laughs, and there was plenty of laughs, but that moment at the start where Caitlin falls to the ground screaming, it just really shocked me. And I think it was a really, from the writing point of view, it was a really good moment to play it. Caitlin did it amazingly, and it set the tone for something that was, not what I was expecting.
I wish that we'd had more from that scene, because I thought it was one of the best scenes of the show, and it was so quick.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, I mean, they did bring it up later, though, when she and Magic were having the discussion about the grief, and that was my favorite scene.
Ever since he leaped, you can't touch him. You can't be in the same space with him. It's almost like living with a
ghost. Ever since the engagement party, ever since Ben leaped, it feels like a part of him. It feels like my Ben died.
And I was like, wow, I'd never considered that, that she might be mourning, like, the loss. I understand he's lost in time. She's bummed, but, he's still there. She still sees him. But this is not her Ben. And I thought that was, wow. Like, I thought that was very impressive. And I think that Caitlin played it perfectly. I kind of felt bad for her, though, because she's wailing in the control room. And then Ben comes back to life. And it's just like, awkward. I don't know. I felt maybe they lingered on it too long, Allison. You thought it was too quick. But I guess they needed to get to the conceit that he's coming back to life. So
they had to go from overwhelming grief to he's back to life to there's a time loop to all this other stuff within the cold open. So yeah, it was a little quick for me.
Yeah. Well, so what do we think about this time loop, like the way that they explained it? This is what I was talking about, maybe some of the connective tissue back to the original series. When Sam and Al switched places, they said,
to leap together, we would have had to either been struck by lightning or have been sitting at ground zero during an atomic detonation.
Oh, it was lightning.
In that case, it was magic lightning. So it kind of makes me think that Margarita Matthews, who wrote this episode, is a fan of the original series. Maybe they went back to look for an in-universe explanation as to how something so different can happen, how the dynamic can change. Yeah, we wanted to do a time loop episode, but let's find a way in-universe to legitimize it.
There was a line about that in the pilot, too, where Al says that the only way for them to retrieve him would be
It requires you to be at ground zero during an atomic detonation.
And I thought that's what this episode was going with. It would be some sort of callback to the original series without being a direct callback. And then when they came to explaining why, I don't know what they said. To be honest, I didn't find anything about that. And they didn't mention because it was a nuclear blast, which would make sense. They didn't say anything. And I just felt kind of like an idiot, honestly, for thinking this would have anything to do with the original series. So I'm just not going to make any theories anymore.
I guess I felt similarly, except maybe I had lower expectations because, we knew there was going to be something to do with a nuclear accelerator in this. We knew there was a time loop. I figured in my head I'd probably be able to headcanon some cool link back, but I never expected an on-screen link back, and that was fine. I went into there expecting that. What disappointed me was, or one of the things that disappointed me was, as I think you were saying, they didn't really explain why the time loop, and did it have anything to do with the nuclear blast, and what was Ziggy doing the whole time? It's all a bit muddled, and it felt like they were getting past it as quickly as possible, just to say, look, all right, we've got this cool time loop gimmick, and let's make the most of it, but let's not spend too much time thinking about the logic of it. And that was an unfortunate hole.
Well, I guess maybe because of my knowledge of the original series, when they said the nuclear explosion was causing it, I filled everything in with headcanon.
Okay, what do we got?
What we've got is a nuclear explosion interacting with a time traveler. It's like a once-in-a-trillion lifetimes phenomenon. Two volatile forces colliding. Basically, the explosion is resetting Ben's leap to the original entry point. The elevator. Yeah.
A lot of stuff makes sense with this, if tying into the original series, if you headcanon it. I don't mind not having direct tie-ins to the original series, and I don't mind having to headcanon stuff, but I was just bothered by the fact that there was no clear explanation, so I felt like I had to headcanon.
And I guess, and I did it without even realizing it. And I don't know that, a casual viewer at home would have really caught into any of that at all. I think that we're in headspace where we can make these connections. And
what does a casual viewer think the explanation is?
The explosion.
Okay, but then that just tells them that, he can never die or something? It didn't explain why this is an exception to the rule.
I watched this just now with my partner, who is definitely a casual viewer, and I asked her what she thought of the episode afterwards, and the only critique that she had, she didn't mention about why the time loop. So I guess her as a casual viewer, she didn't really care why there was a time loop. She just thought they were all pretty stupid for assuming that the time loop was going to go on infinitely, because she always assumed that they'd just run out of bodies after they've gone through everyone in the elevator. In fact, actually, halfway through the episode, she was just like, "They're so stupid." She just said that out loud, and she never says stuff out loud during episodes because she knows that, no, be quiet. But yeah, the reason for the time loop, I don't know, maybe it's something only we nerds care about. She certainly didn't seem to pick up on it, but
yeah, one I expected, and maybe this was a silly expectation on my part, I expected every time Ben leapt in that maybe he would be cohabiting the same space as a leaper, but from a future point, like a future vantage point. So, but I guess the fact that he was dying, because in my mind's eye, I saw by the end of the episode, like an elevator filled with 5 Bens in different outfits, all working in tandem to see what was going on. They didn't go that way. Maybe that would have been too trippy. I don't know, but that's where I was hoping it would go. And to see Ben working with himself somehow, now that we have this conceit, do you think we could maybe do something like that on the show?
I think that would add even more complexity, though, because I was wondering how they'd play it, whether it would be a complete reset or something more like what you're saying. But then if he leapt back and was able to interact with himself, then surely he'd be changing his own previous memories of events, and then you get tied up in this whole bootstrap paradox stuff. Like on Leap 2, if he talks to the Leap 1 version of himself, well then surely the Leap 2 version of himself is going to remember the Leap 1 having had the conversation with Leap 2, even though when we saw Leap 1, he wasn't having that conversation. It's probably better they just did a complete reset.
It also eliminates everyone else from the equation to the point where how is he going to find out who did it and why?
Yeah, no, I guess I was going more time travel geekery than story mechanics, and yeah, both very valid points as to
we've seen that done, but it has to be done very carefully, and I don't think it can be done in a 42-minute episode with very short time loops.
All right. Well, I mean, for all that, I still think it was interesting. And another thing that made me think of the original series is when he said...
So, he's stuck in this leap, doomed to repeat it over and over again until he figures out what he's there to do and fix it.
My mind went right to Stoppa, because that's how I always felt what Stoppa was doing at Al's place until Sam came and helped him fix that leap.
I need find way. Get them out this time. We know get them out soon. Then they'll come out.
How do you know all this?
I've been there. Too many times.
That line, I've been here too many times before, always made me think that he couldn't figure out how to save Tonchi and Pete. He couldn't figure it out, and he was just doing it over and over and over again. And then Sam came and helped. So that was another, I guess maybe this is an episode of headcanon for me. Because that's what I found, what I liked most about it was that it made me think of the original series in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, but no one can leap into the same person twice, right?
I assume we were dealing with a closed time-like curve, but this code suggests that Ziggy doesn't think Ben can leap into the same body twice.
That never happened on the original series. Right? This ties in so closely to the original series. Remember how Sam couldn't leap outside his lifetime because a safety protocol? Remember that?
But this is this is a time loop. I guess this is a different thing to... I assume you're comparing him to him leaping into Jimmy a couple of seasons apart or whatever.
What I'm trying to get at here is that this show can't coincide with the original Quantum Leap in my mind. There's just too many contradictions. I don't think anyone involved with this show has seen it in 30 years. It feels like it's made by people who half remember it. And I don't really understand the point of making a sequel series that doesn't remember anything from the original. I've never heard of any other instance where someone's made a sequel to something and refused to watch the thing they've made a sequel to. That seems insane to me. That's why I just hit a point where I just shut off. I just can't anymore. I give up.
Which I get. I think in this episode they had valid reasons for doing it differently. They needed some way of having an end to the loop, and I can understand why they introduced that logic of he can't re-leap. And I don't know, I can headcanon that away the same way I've headcanon away most things this series, which is it's a new project with new rules based on similar technology. But I'm not disputing what you're saying though.
All right. If it was one or two things, I get it. I totally get it. I do. But there's not a single thing outside of Sam and Al existing from the original show that hasn't been contradicted, hand-waved away, or excised completely. Name one thing.
There's a handling.
There's, okay, a handling.
An imaging chamber.
That's
two
what
things.
I'm saying,
I got two.
though. It just doesn't feel like there's any interest in the old show. In any way, even down to the basics that was in the saga cell, why Sam couldn't leap outside his lifetime, but they don't even remember that. So how is this a sequel? I think there's this misconception that what I want from this is them to have Sam come in and then they're going to leap over and meet Jimmy and go to these old leaps and then people from the project come over and then they go to New Mexico and all these other direct connections. And that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is just the basic rules. I would rather they never name drop Sam or Al again, and instead it's consistent with the same universe this is supposed to be part of. Every time I mention the old show, it feels like it's like, well, this is like TNG. It's its own thing. And it's like, I don't think it's that crazy to ask that this gels with the show it's supposedly a sequel to. It shouldn't be surprising to ask that it connects in some way to the show it originates from. But I don't think that they're interested in it. I don't believe it. I'm being really negative here. I'm sorry, but it's I just hit a wall.
It's a valid point of view, and I can see what you're saying, but in my mind, I'll fill in that stuff as a fan because they say it's in the same universe. And
but how do you fill in things that contradict it?
Much like Matt, I think, okay, this is a new project with different parameters. So I want the series to coincide more with the original series in, I think, some plot stuff. But when it gets to, how stuff worked there as opposed to how stuff works here, I can say to myself, okay, this is a completely new team, as Matt likes to say, a completely new build, and there are going to be completely new rules. And I don't mind that so much because it gives them their own flavor and it makes other types of leap possible. I think it could harken back to some of the themes of the original while striking out new directions without being, I guess, what they considered fettered by some of the rules of the original. Now, I don't know that those were limitations in any way, but, obviously they want to stake their own ground here. They want to stake their own claim.
I don't think this is purposefully trying to stake their own claim. I don't think so. I think they just don't remember and they don't know and they don't have anyone to check or care.
And I was just about to jump in because I had a feeling you were about to say that and say, we don't know one way or the other whether they're making conscious decisions to change things or it's, as you suggest, just through lack of caring. But to me, all I care about is getting a show that we're told takes place in the same universe and involves time travel and makes me feel the way that Quantum Leap used to make me feel because it's got action, adventure, romance, drama. It makes me feel good about the potential optimism of the world around me. And the show does not always do that. We're like, a dozen episodes in and there's been some misfires. But that's the important stuff to me. The tech behind it, less so. But I think what we're hearing here is all three of us have slightly different takes on what we need from something to be a proper sequel.
Even as a standalone thing, I thought the overall tone of this episode, everyone was really stinky. Everyone was really stinky. Like, there were moments of brilliance in there, but there were so many moments where I'm like, man, I just wish everyone wasn't so stinky all the time.
Well, can you elaborate on stinky?
Stinky, like arms crossed, huffy, stick up their butts, irritated about things. And like, I don't get why Addison, even when she's joking around with Ben, always gotta fold her arms, roll her eyes. Like, why is everyone so uptight and stinky all the time? And then you got Janice, everyone's bitching at each other about Janice, and then Jen's pissed about something, and then I just I don't want it to feel stinky all the time. It's irritating to watch.
Earlier on, when we were talking about some of the characterization stuff back at the project, I was mid-breath, I was mid-sentence, and then we ended up going on a tangent about Caitlin, which was fine because we were talking about Caitlin. But I was about to finish the sentence by saying, and the other standout for me in terms of characterization was Nanrissa playing that scene out at the end with Ernie, where she was getting stinky. I wasn't going to use those words, but I loved that stuff at the end with Jen being upset about Magic's decision and all the stuff with Janice.
I wish it felt like that decision meant anything. It's like, should we choose to shut the project down, or should we just do nothing? And they're like, we'll do what Janice says, do nothing. And then Ben solved the leap. And it's like, wow, they really accomplished a lot at the project. They did nothing. Pretty cool. It just didn't feel like it meant anything.
And here I felt like they gave us a little bit more insight into the process of how they gather information for the leap. And another thing that made me think of the leap back, because first Addison's in the imaging chamber saying, I can't get much online. I have to go to Jen for this. So then Jen finds some of these things. They put it together that it's a cover up, and they say, why didn't Ziggy realize this? And then Ian comes in and they say,
Ziggy isn't all knowing. It's a fallible AI that selflessly calculates probability outcomes based on what Ben sees. Ben just saw the bomb, so now Ziggy can calculate a probable location for the trigger.
It reminded me of the line in the leap back back where Donna says,
"What's happening with Al?"
Ziggy doesn't know.
Well, don't you remember? The data from the memory banks was limited to your lifetime.
Was in my lifetime, right? And Al's in 1945.
And we didn't know that till we got your letter.
We've been loading Ziggy with data from 45 as fast as we can pull it from the National Archives. But it could be days before Ziggy projects a theory on what Al's there to do.
Ziggy still needs a basis on which to formulate her projections.
Ziggy was just dumb in this episode. Don't apologize for Ziggy.
No, but I'm telling you how it came together in my head. You asked me, how do I feel any connective tissue to the original series? Maybe it's because I'm just, very adept at headcanoning when I want to. And they say it's in the same universe. I can't help but think of these things. And to me, these are connection points.
How does this connect to what they said about the machine is leaping Ben around? There's no higher power. Apparently Ziggy, with no information, is like, this is a time you need to go to fix something. I don't know what, but apparently this is something you need to fix. How does this even inconsistent with what they've said on this show?
I think that what might be going on is that since Ben is working with Janice, Ben uploaded the points that he needs to leap to in order to reach this destination in the future. They said he's leaping to specific places so that he can slingshot into the future, which, quote, shouldn't be possible. So I think that Ben has decided when and where he's going to leap in tandem with Janice when they figured out what they needed to do.
So Ben knew he needed to go to this place where everyone died, but he didn't, there was a government cover-up, so there was no proof anything wrong happened. Ben just knew he had to go to that point in time to fix that and programmed it into Ziggy.
That's my headcanon on this, because Ben was the only, he was the only actor here. He did it by himself.
How did he know? If it was not recorded what happened there, how did he know?
I don't know.
I have different headcanon on this.
I don't know what happened. Maybe somebody from the future came and told him, and we got an intimation of that in the end. At the very end, the last scene was, I'm going to give you a name.
I'm going to give you a name. A name. The name of the person who told Ben to leap in the first place.
Now, I know every fanboy like me out there wants that name to be Sam Beckett, but, it won't. It won't be.
It'll probably be future Addison or Leaper X. It's going to be some boring answer.
But I mean, I feel like there's a bigger picture that we're not seeing. And there's some foreknowledge here that we're not privy to yet.
There's a lot riding on that. And this is just my headcanon. So again, it's nothing on screen to support this, but how I've been seeing this so far is that Ben programmed in dates, times, destinations, but there is still a god in this universe that's taking those dates and times and locations and saying, okay, there's somebody there that needs their life saved or needs help passing an exam or this, that, or the other. And there is still a supernatural higher power in the Quantum Leap universe. It's just that Ziggy is now able to better control where the leaps are going, just not necessarily why.
All right. I've pretty much taken the GTFW equation out of this because there seems to be a plan that Ben himself hatched. So I feel like Ben is the architect of all of this, and just how that came to be will be revealed before the end of the first season. So I hope they solve the mystery box anyway by the end of the first season. Otherwise, I'll be really aggravated.
I struggle with the putting right what once went wrong as being anything other than a GTFW type thing, unless literally like stopping that nuclear reactor exploding and making sure that everyone in Salvation was happy and all that, unless that literally ties into the mystery box. I think there's got to be a god out there that wants everyone to be happy.
All right. And I guess maybe I don't think about it that much in this incarnations because they mentioned it quite a bit in the original series. I mean, it was an ever-present sort of running theme, and it doesn't come up here. So I feel like we're on a sort of a different footing, much like with everything else. I feel like it's a different build, different footing, different feel. And yeah, I guess your mileage may vary. I have no trouble, though, connecting it to the original. I like when they call back to the original.
When have they called back to the original?
They mentioned Sam and Al in this episode.
They name-dropped Sam and Al. That's it.
Yeah, but to me, that's a callback. How is that not a callback to the original? I mean, they're still in the same universe.
There's not that much from the original to call back to. It was an anthology, and a very, very loosely linked anthology from one week to the next.
I think it's just, Allison, I think that we just have fundamentally different experiences watching the show, obviously. And the stuff that you find is too little is enough to sustain me.
I don't need a bunch of name drops and a bunch of things happening all the time. I just want it to feel consistent.
I understand.
I feel like I get treated like I'm making these big demands, and I'm really not. Like, I'm sorry, I'm getting defensive here. I just get irritated whenever it gets brought up. It's like, well, it's its own thing, you know? It's not supposed to connect to the old series like this. They're doing their own thing, and it's like, well, I mean, if you look at the sequel to something and you go, how does this connect to the original? And it's like, well, it's its own thing. Then it's not a sequel anymore, is it?
Yeah.
You know, another thing that made me think about the original series, we had the JFK speech, and JFK loomed large in Don Belisario's mind. And
many times.
that's one of my favorite parts of this episode, because I love that speech beyond reason. That's the speech that he gave at Rice University on the same day in history. I was trying to look up if it was at 10 o'clock in the morning. It seemed a little early to give a speech at a college at 10 o'clock in the morning, but that Kennedy speech is so inspiring that I've used it for other stuff that I've worked on, like my own radio show. And that point when he says,
"We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win."
That to me also gave me sort of feeling about that optimism that the original series tried to put forth, and made me think, okay, at least their hearts are in the right place with this. And are you guys familiar with that speech at all? That Rice University? It's one of his most famous.
I've heard bits of it. I've never seen it in full, and I want to now. I think the speech happened at 9 a.m.
Oh, okay.
So it could have been on some kind of delay. I don't know.
No, I think they're different time zones. They were in Texas, and he was at Texas A&M. Yeah, he was in Texas as well. Yeah. So it's hard to think that there was a nuclear meltdown in Texas the same day that Kennedy was giving a speech in the same state. And big cover up, huh?
Little nuclear meltdown.
Yeah. And a lot of good references to science fiction. I think that they give A Stranger in a Strange Land. And what was the first one that he mentioned?
Solaris.
Oh, Solaris. Okay, I couldn't understand what he said. Good George Clooney movie. I never read Solaris.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've never read the book, but I love the movie.
Yeah, and I couldn't get through Stranger in a Strange Land. I'm just not a Heinlein guy. But it's, nice to have that name dropped as well. So, yeah. I mean, one thing I kind of thought was a dubious line is when Jen said,
"I pulled everything I could on time loops, and Ian was right. Aside from some vague scientific theories and questionable Groundhog Day fan fiction, there's not a whole lot that can help Ben."
Dubious Groundhog Day fanfic.
Yeah, and I was like, is this the episode apologizing for itself?
I didn't even read it like that. But I want to find some Groundhog Day fanfic. Is there such a thing?
I think there's fanfic for everything.
Yeah, true.
One thing I also found very intriguing was the themes that they were saying that everybody thinks they're the hero of their own story.
Mm-hmm.
And Ben is now having doubts, even though he, conveniently doesn't remember. Like, are we the villains here? Like, we think that we're doing the right thing, but are we? And when they caught Wagner doing the sabotage, he said,
"Great technology always falls in the wrong hands. One day, it'll be the end of us all."
And now we think about that nebulous point in the future. And Allison, you've said this before. You think it's some kind of apocalyptic thing that they need to avoid. So I'm wondering if they're moving it in that direction.
I haven't touched on one of my other big issues with this episode. And this has been building up for a little while now. It was bound to happen at some point. But Janice has now well and truly become the voice of exposition / plot twists whenever there's a commercial break or end of episode. I mean, the cliffhanger at the end, great. I'm looking forward to finding out this name, but it is just like, okay, now we don't need to see anything else for the rest of the season. Every plot revelation can be either Ben remembering something or Janice saying, "Yeah, you know what? I'm just going to tell you now." And that, with a show with so much potential, every time they do one of those things, it gets my back up. And it was okay when Janice was on the run. And then when she was being held prisoner at Project at the HQ, it was sort of, this is going to happen. Now she's out there in the open and helping them. They're going to have to string this out for another 7 episodes of her helping them, but not helping them enough to wrap up the show too quickly.
Well, you had mentioned earlier when they brought her in to the facility that they basically have written themselves into a corner now, because they can't really have the reveal too quickly. Otherwise, the mystery box disappears and sort of the overall thrust of the season goes away, which I question the need to cling to it anyway. But obviously that's how they've mapped out this season. So now they got to follow that course. And as we know, it's already done shooting, so it's not going to change. They're going to start season 2 in a couple of weeks. Yeah. So, we're stuck with that convention, unfortunately. And it annoys me too. But at the same time, now that I know that this is the way it has to be because plot, because show.
Yeah.
All right. We'll just get what we get. And, I can choose to let it aggravate me. And sometimes it does. Or I can just say, all right, well, that's just that,
But they've been able to show rather than tell stuff before. The reveal of Leaper X was such an awesome moment that just happened. And I say this as one of the biggest defenders on this podcast, maybe the only defender on this podcast of the mystery box, because I like the mystery box stuff. But it does feel like now, looking back and looking to what I expect to see over the next few weeks, a lot of the way the mystery box has been handled is just by Ben or Janice saying something and drip feeding the plot out a bit. And a lot of it for me is now hanging back on that moment at the end of Salvation or Bust. So I hope there's some big stuff that we actually see in the coming weeks.
Yeah, some kind of revelation, and it'd be nice if they put something, a new surprise in, like the Leaper X surprise, or at least tied back to the Leaper X thing, and gave us a little bit more of the bigger picture instead of this, it is so much going through the motions, and it is aggravating at times. But I feel like once we do see where they're going, anyway, I hope once we see the big reveal that more of this will make sense in retrospect. And I don't know that I'll be able to forgive it, because, annoying writing is just annoying writing. But at the same time, I could maybe be more at ease with it. And I guess that's a fine line. Maybe it's a weird line. But my whole thing is that once they do get over this stuff, maybe, to quote you, Allison, everybody at the project will be less stinky. Maybe they'll be more collegial. It'll be more of a congenial environment for them to be working in, and they can just focus on the leaps, and they can just focus on, building the character in a meaningful way instead of having everybody at odds with everybody all the time. And I feel like that's the biggest failing, is just the energy is just so off, because you want to have that optimistic leap feeling. And I think that Raymond pulls that stuff off very well on the leap portions. But when you get back to the project, just for the sake of drama, they'd have everybody working against everybody else. And it's just not a pleasant viewing experience. I can understand exactly where you're coming from, Allison, but it's, I guess maybe that's my defense mechanism. I just fill it in with different headcanons and say, oh, how do I feel like this maybe ties back to the original series? Maybe when they do name drop Sam and Al, it gets me a little bit more excited, because I feel, okay, well, that's what I'm looking for as a fan. I want to see connections to the old show. I want to get the feeling of the old show. I hope if they get over this mystery box stuff, once they do, they can work in a more positive direction on a lot of this stuff. Because we've mentioned before, there's like great casting and I think great potential here. I just hope that they're able to capitalize on it better as the show goes into its second season. And I think that's probably going to be my final thoughts on this, because I don't know about you guys, I don't have a lot more to say about Leap, Die, Repeat. Allison, do you want to give any final thoughts?
I liked Ben. That's about it.
Okay. We all like Ben. And how about you, Matt?
I haven't mentioned Ian's do. I love Ian's new do. That made me happy. It was good. Yeah, I think, for all we've said about this episode, the performances, all the actors in it, I think, were uniformly outstanding, and there was a lot of very good writing in it, drama and comedy. There were just some bits that fell down, and, you know, I said this about A Year of Little Faith, and I went back and rewatched it a few more times, and slowly I came to peace with the bits that had irritated me, because the rest of it was so good, and I think on reflection, this will later be one of my favourite episodes, but it just needs a bit of time to settle.
All right, fair enough, and I think that's probably a good place to end. I think the whole first season needs time to settle, to be honest with you. So here's to hoping that it gets settled in a satisfactory way, and I think that brings us to the end of our discussion of Leap, Die, Repeat, but don't make like uranium atoms yet. You don't gotta split yet.
Gotta split? You know, because uranium atoms, they split inside a nuclear reactor.
Gotta split instead of goodbye.
Right.
That's good.
Because after the break, we will be bringing you our interview with Joe DePinnacle. Stay tuned.
The QLP is brought to you by listeners like you. Please go to patreon.com/quantumleappodcast and give as much as you can. For as little as $1 a month, you can be a contributor to the Quantum Leap podcast. It goes to covering our server cost and helps keep the podcast going. Thank you.
On the latest episode of Leaps Elsewhere.
Oh, we gonna have some fun on this podcast, guys.
Today we'll be talking about the NCIS New Orleans Season 1 episode, Chasing Ghosts, that features both Scott Bakula and Dean Stockwell.
We're all going to talk about the accent, let's face it.
The Baccent. Dean Stockwell is T-Bone.
Dean was really solid. I believe that this was his very last TV appearance.
It feels like he spent a day on a boat and got to hang out with his old friend Scott Bakula again. And
this is the complete wrong role for Scott Bakula.
He did a lot of squinty acting in this, did Scott.
How many Navy crimes can you come up with? Apparently, if you're Donald Belisario, 10 million.
Yeah. I was glad that Scott took a moment to explain to us that discrimination hasn't ended.
It's probably the most dynamic episode of television that Scott Bakula stars in that revolves around an anti-Semitic lynching.
A ringing endorsement. I think we're all in agreement. Everyone, tune in to NCIS Knowledge.
To find out how to hear this and other Patreon exclusive shows, go to patreon.com/quantumleappodcast. That's patreon.com/quantumleappodcast.
It's the way they roll in New Orleans.
But is it?
Maybe.
Hi, this is Susan Diol, and you are listening to the Quantum Leap Podcast.
Hey everyone, we're back. Again and again and again. But we haven't died. That's good. Wasn't Ben oddly chill about, just, perishing in a fiery explosion?
Yeah, it started to become a comic thing by the end, maybe inappropriately.
But, I mean, just think about his feelings there. Now he literally knows what it feels like the agony of, being killed. Or did he leap before that? Because he did die in the control room. Does Ben know what death is like now?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Did although everyone at the project thought he died, was it just because did he die, or did they just lose connection with him?
He asks if he died. I think they said he died.
Yeah, he flatlines.
Yeah, but is the flatline not just because they've lost connection with him?
Oh, but they say that he died, not just we lost the connection.
It's all quite theological.
I guess if Ben maybe Swiss cheesed about what it's like to be dead. I don't know. Maybe it was just.
But if he literally died, I mean, someone dies, you can't bring them back to life. So I think it brings up all kinds of questions about the nature of the universe.
Yeah, I'm sure that it'll be fodder for headcanon for a long time to come.
Yes,
the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
So there are going to be some articles written on that one. But
yes.
Hey, that's not what we're here to talk about now. I promised you guys before the break that we would have an interview. So Matt, you want to talk us into this one?
Yeah, so Albie and I had a great conversation with Joe DePinnacle, who played Eugene Wagner. We had a great conversation with him this weekend. Really chilled out guy, really fun, friendly. Can't wait for you guys to hear it.
Hello, Leapers, and welcome back to the Quantum Leap Podcast. I'm Albie. I'm here with Matt, as always. And today we have Joe DePinnacle. It was Eugene in the control room with the pen.
Isn't it always?
Yes. We should have seen it from the start.
You look too young to have the IMDb you have. How long have you been working in this business?
Oh, dear. I have been working professionally for it's 30 years this year. To be fair, I started very young. I started in the theater when I was 9 years old. So and I've had I had a long career as a busboy and barback. I've taken, I've gone all over the place. It's not chock full of, I'm not that successful, but yes, I've been at this a very, very long time. My father was an actor, and my grandfather on my mother's side was an actor. They were both classical theater actors, and I come by this, as I like to say, very dishonestly. So yes, it's been a long road.
Do you remember some of your earlier roles?
I mean, my earlier roles. Yeah, I mean, again, like I said, I started at the Stratford Festival of Canada. I was there as a kid for 5 seasons, and I was in Antony and Cleopatra and Cyrano de Bergerac and Waiting for Godot and a number of shows. But my first role on film and TV was in a movie called Elvis Meets Nixon. And I played a character called 10-Year-Old Boy, which is a pivotal role, clearly. That Elvis, the basic idea is that Elvis went to meet Nixon to try and help with the war on drugs, while wildly addicted to drugs. And he went and he was sort of deputized as an officer of against drugs, maybe of the DEA. I don't really, I'm forgetting some of the details. And he meets this kid on the plane. That was my first role in a movie or a TV show.
This sounds like a film I need to see. Thank you.
Do you have any recollection of that in your brain? I know it's hard to remember.
Yeah, no, I remember it very clearly. Those sort of initial days on a set. I remember it was back when it was all filmed, and so everything took a great deal longer. So it wasn't uncommon. I had 4 or 5 lines. It was one scene, and I must have been there for 12 hours. I mean, you just kind of waited. Back then, you would wait around for what felt like days. But I remember my dad took me, and we could go to the craft service track. I mean, everything is so novel at that point. Now it sort of feels old hat that there's gummy bears and Ritz crackers everywhere you look. But back then it was a really novel experience. And also it was something, I grew up in the theater, and moving into film and TV was what sort of differentiated me from my dad and from my grandfather. And that was a decision I was very conscious of making. And so my first day on set was a really big deal, because I was starting to get really interested in movies and I think at the time just doing something different than my family. It felt sort of very inherited to be an actor for me at that age, and I wanted something that I could sort of forge my own path. And so those early days on set were really, really important, because I was kind of figuring out what I liked about acting and what I sort of brought to the table. So yeah, it was certainly a formative day as a 10-year-old boy.
Did you ever question that desire to go into acting? Like, after you'd had a few years doing TV and film, did you experiment with any more standard kinds of career, or was that
not
it?
really? I think I questioned it much later. I will say that some of my first jobs, I booked a couple of commercials back to back when I was about 13, and I almost quit because I hated doing commercials so much. I haven't done a commercial since I was about 13, and just because it had, the problem is that being on a movie or even a TV show for an actor, if you're not acting, like if you're just standing there holding a candy bar, it has very little to do with you. It's not really an actor's medium. Theater is an actor's medium. So doing a commercial, if you like the acting part of the day, which can be very minimal a lot of the time, a commercial, there's almost none of it. And so it can be very mind-numbing to stand there and do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again with a bunch of disinterested people sitting on a couch, telling you to say it this way, that way, and the other. So that was certainly a time I thought about maybe getting out of the business. But I mean, the reality is that like I said, I come from a family of performers. It's sort of, it's not hyperbole to say that it's in the genes in a lot of ways. It just nothing else ever seemed as exciting or important. Not important in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, there are much more important things, but to be present and to be alive and to be with other people creating something that there's just nothing like it. So I never, like I said, I worked in restaurants for years and years as a feature of being an out of work actor, but I never thought about, every time I thought about having another job, I realized, like I thought for a while, maybe I want to be a lawyer. And then what I realized was I want to give the closing arguments in the movie as a lawyer. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't want to do a bunch of paperwork and school and nonsense. I want to say, I want to give a speech written by Aaron Sorkin or Patty Chayefsky or, like, I'm not really that interested in the nuts and bolts of what being a lawyer actually is. I want to give a performance. I want to perform and get someone off, but that's acting. That's not being a lawyer. So the short answer is no, not really.
I noticed you did a lot of genre work in Arrow, and how did you get into being like a superhero, Ragman, and all that?
Well, that's an interesting one. I when those shows started happening, when Arrow started, the casting directors of those shows, predominantly David Rappaport, became a fan of mine years and years ago. I had auditioned for Gossip Girl, and he always really liked me. And I had auditioned for something else in the Arrowverse. I won't be too specific about what it was, and I wasn't quite right for it in the end, but there were some people pulling for me, and Greg Berlanti became a fan. And as big and powerful as Greg Berlanti is, he's one of the real human beings in show business, and he remembered me. And so when that didn't happen, about a year later, I got a call. An offer to come and be on Arrow, which is not something, I don't get offers ever, really. That's not where I am in my career. And he liked me and wanted to pay it forward and gave me that part. It was originally supposed to be a couple of episodes, and they ended up liking me and keeping me around for a little while. And so yeah, that was just one of those, if you're around long enough and you were, you do the work, and you're going to find, people say it's who you know. It's who your fans are. Eventually you start to meet people, and as we're talking about Quantum Leap, show run by Martin Garrow, who's a great friend of mine. And we became friends because we loved working together. It wasn't that we were buddies and he put me in a show. We worked very closely on a TV show. And we really loved working together. And then we ended up becoming great friends. But, you work long enough in this business and days on set are long. And if you like being around people, that can go a long way. Great art doesn't get made by people hating each other. I don't think. I'm sure it's possible, but especially TV, it's a grind to make TV, especially an hour-long drama. The days are long, the years are long. Network TV, they work 9, 10. I was on Grey's Anatomy for a little while. They worked almost 11 months of the year. Like, it's a grueling schedule. And if you don't like the people you're around, it can be even more grueling. So you're just always trying to make fans. And that's sort of how I ended up on Arrow.
Was it Blind Spot with Martin that pretty much got you Quantum Leap? Did you get the offer for Quantum Leap, or did that work?
No, I auditioned. I got Blind Spot because Martin and I had done a show together called the LA Complex, which was a short-lived show on the CW that is very near and dear to all of us who were on. It was sort of about a group of disparate, out of work show business hopefuls. I played a stand-up comedian, and there was there was a dancer and a bunch of actors and someone trying to be a music producer, and it was very critically adored, and nobody watched it. So but we all loved making it, and it was sort of it's how I met Martin. It's how we became friends. And when Blind Spot came around, he was, that show was could be very heavy, and it was, it was a procedural, and it had a lot of FBI and intrigue. And I think he had wanted to infuse more humor into it and more heart. And so he had written this part. He called me and said, I wrote a part for you. We're going to make everyone fall in love with you, and then we're going to kill you and break everyone's heart. And so I was like, well, that sounds fun. He's like, and we shoot it in New York. So that's how that happened. And then Quantum Leap, I got an audition and I auditioned and ended up getting it, so it's how these things work, and the machinations of the higher ups of show business is certainly beyond my pay grade. So sometimes you get an offer and that's great, and sometimes you have to go through the regular channels, and it's all the same to me at the end of the day. But certainly I'm sure Martin was looking out for my audition. I would hope, but yeah.
So how long was it from auditioning to actually being on set?
Oh gosh, probably maybe a week. Yeah, the guest star role in television is a fast moving train. They're making these things. You forget they have to not only write them, they have to get them approved, and they have to, everything is in a condensed timeline. So sets are being built, and so hiring people, especially a show like Quantum Leap, I would imagine, which is almost an entirely new cast every episode. Other than obviously the core in the Quantum Leap lab and Ben and Addison, but every episode, it's not like they're always at the office and there's one new person. He's meeting a whole world of people in every episode, as you know. So yeah, it all moves pretty quickly. Yeah, it was probably, I want to say it was about a week, maybe a little longer, but not much.
Can you take me through the process of filming an episode like this, the one with time loops? Like, are the camera setups the same, and you just go through each different time loop and do it differently, or are you doing it more in order? Or it doesn't make it more difficult than a normal guest starring role on a TV show when you have to do the same things over and over again, but different?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, the first thing we did quite smartly, I think, was to do the opening of what would then be the thing we loop around over and over again, just so that we could set what happens. So we go, that's the longest version of it that we see. So this is what we do beginning to end, and everyone, that's sort of what makes it difficult, is it's not like what's great about filming a film or a TV show is you finish a scene, that's it. You don't have to think about it again, Whereas this, you're kind of going, okay, well, on this line, I picked up the pencil, and on that line, I pressed this button. And you're kind of, much like you would rehearse a play, you're sort of blocking it out to be recreated later. And then, sort of as you go on, it gets a little easier because, for instance, pretty much all the stuff in the elevator in one day, we just sort of went, everything that happens in the elevator, we do from this camera angle. And then they move it over to the side and they go, everything that happens over here, and they go up top. It's called block shooting, right? So everything, we try and use the set efficiently so that we're not relighting. I say we like I'm lighting anything. I'm not lighting anything. That's against the rules. But yeah, so it sort of starts out a little more laborious for something like this because you're really trying to track and set up, because you don't want to get to day 5 and go, oh, we forgot that he was supposed to do this thing because that's what matters in this version of the loop. So you're trying to track, but the writing on this episode was really, really airtight. It was a really beautifully written script and a really fun, and everything had been thought of. And the writer was there every day. She was there every day and had obviously, given this a great deal of thought so that everything could be sort of perfectly marked as we went through. So realistically, the most difficult part of it, I think, was mostly for Ray, who had to constantly be changing costumes. I know usually he leaps into someone and that's the episode. And this one, he leapt into 5 people. So when we're doing the elevator, we do one thing, he's me, then he has to change into the Colonel, then he has to change, he's constantly changing into different costumes. But yeah, it sort of gets easier as you go, as you realize, like, okay, we've set everything right. And now we just have to, you're kind of checking things off a list. You're going, okay, well, now we have to do the scene this way where he's this person and the fireball comes in at this time, or, you know, whatever it is. But yeah, it's a bit of a fun puzzle to figure out and go, we want to set this up right. Because the last thing you want is for it not to pay off. You want the idea that, you know, you do an episode where it's basically all in one set. It's got to feel like it's got momentum and it's got, you know, movement and stakes. And I think the writing, especially on this episode, and the direction, Pamela was such an incredible director, and yeah, they just did a great job. So yeah, it sort of started out a little more laborious, and then it sort of picks up steam.
Did you get much extra prep time yourself to get your head around all that? Because I sort of imagine the writer and director probably had like storyboards up with kind of the red string pointing to everything, but as actors, were you all just being led through it, or did you spend some time beforehand, kind of head down, the hell is this all about?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the other thing you have to remember is that in something like this, we're not aware that it's happening again, right? Like none of us are aware that this is a Groundhog Day type situation. So you're trying to look at it from as if that opening chunk is the whole day. That's all it is, right? There's not a new arc for you when they loop back. It's just restarting the same thing. So really you're looking at that and going like, within this, from my point of view, you know, what's happening? What do I need to clock? And especially for me, like, what do I need to sort of sprinkle in there? You know, not too much, but you know, but yeah. And again, like I said, it was so well written that it was very clear there was no point where you're like, well, wait a second, this is supposed to happen, but we didn't do that there was none of that, because it was a really airtight script. But to answer your actual question, no, we don't get a lot of time. You know, again, guest starring on a show, you're kind of dropped in, and that's a skill you sort of have to develop as an actor in television. It's like, you know, you have to be able to learn lines very quickly and adapt. Meet a whole, you know, crew and cast of people, drop in, and luckily on something like Quantum Leap, you know, this is, I mean, first of all, you know, a show run by Martin Garrow is these things are top down, or it is always just a treat. You know, he sets a tone in his shows that you know, no assholes allowed, and everyone's working towards the greater good, and there's no egomaniacs, and that comes from him, but it also comes from Ray and Caitlin, who also set an incredible tone and are welcoming and kind and fun and excited to be there, and excited to have whoever's there that week. Like, we're their castmates, you know. It's not like there's one person joining a crew of people that are always there. It's like they have a whole new cast to play with, and they were extremely welcoming. So, because, you know, you don't get a lot of time in TV, but fortunately on this one, that wasn't much of an issue.
With such a small cast, and with all of your scenes basically being with each other the whole time, and the block shooting, did you guys form a bond like more than you would as a normal guest star coming in to do a few scenes? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, we did. The guy who played the Colonel, him and I hit it off, got on like a house on fire. I found out that he did a movie with my grandfather called Baby's Day Out. And he was a theater guy, and we started talking theater. And, you know, again, you're sitting around all day, and, you know, in the best of cases, you're a bunch of actors who just got a job. You should be pretty happy. You know, it's a nice place to be. I live in North Hollywood, and we shot this on the Universal lot. I've never shot on the Universal lot. It's 15 minutes from my house. You know, you're driving as the sun's coming up. You drive onto, you know, arguably the most iconic studio lot in California, and, you know, someone brings you breakfast if you want. You know, it's a good day. You know, it should be a good day. And so, and I think everyone took that, and we all had a real blast. You know, Robert Picardo was having a great time, and he's a real,
he's a real pro, and we got along famously. And again, the cast was so welcoming and really set a tone of, we're here to do great work and to have fun. It should be fun. It's not coal mining. We're making fun art that should be a good time. And it really was.
Is it true that you've met Scott Bakula at some point?
Yeah, I have. I guess kind of briefly. So when I was about, like I said, I've done this a long time, and I'm Canadian. I've been in LA for about 10 years now, but I came up working in Toronto, and back. This is a long time ago. Let's just say that I was a teenager, and back then they used to do hundreds and hundreds of pilots. Most of them never went to series. Now it's a lot more selective. They spend their money, I think, a lot more wisely. But they used to make tons of these things. And in Toronto, every once in a while, they would have a call, for some show, and you never heard anything. And so I had auditioned for some sitcom or single cam, some comedy, right? It was called Father Can't Cope. About a dad whose kids are this and his wife, and they're trying to go on a trip or something. I don't really remember. Starring Scott Bakula. And I get a call saying, you're the guy. They watched your tape, you're the guy. And they want to fly you down to LA to meet you. You're the guy, right? And so I fly down with my mom. I was 16. They put us up in a hotel, and we get driven over to Fox, and I walk in the room and I look around, and there's 6 other the guys. And so I realized, okay. This is a screen test. This is my first screen test. And I go into the room to audition, and there's Scott Bakula, and he reads with us. He's very, very sweet. And we all do it a number of times, and they come out and they call 3 of our names. Mine was one. We go over to the network. And I walk into a room, and Scott is sitting there in front of me, very kind, very encouraging. And I look up, and there's no joke, 50 people in sort of an auditorium style room. And in all honesty, I buckled. Like I had no idea this was what it was going to be like. And I started shaking like a leaf. Like no one prepared me for what, I've since done a number of network tests, and they're nerve wracking, but you know what to expect. People are there to kind of judge you or, what have you. But I had no idea what to expect. He was very, very kind. The show shot the pilot, and you've never heard of the show Father Can't Cope, so it never went anywhere. But that is my somewhat loose connection to Scott Bakula.
That's a very cool connection.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's all right. He was like my first acting trip to LA was with Scott Bakula.
That's pretty good.
That's all right.
One weird technical question I had when I was watching the episode, I saw they had a photo of you and Robert Picardo kind of de-aged. Was that like one of your old photos, or did you guys go in and do a little photo session and then they photoshopped it, or how did that work?
Yeah, we they did a little photo shoot in the offices, and I actually didn't do it with him. We're not in the same room. And then everything they do digitally. I mean, now they do everything. The amount they can do digitally is so incredible. So they were just like, just stand like this, we'll do the rest. So yeah, no, that was not an old picture of me. I don't know if they referenced old pictures or they just made me look like that. But yeah. That's all movie magic.
So they did Photoshop you and Bob together, but not for the reason we might have thought.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we ended up being together for many days, but by that point we're already shooting, and they needed the photo, and I think he was coming in a day later or something, so it's one of those scheduling things.
For most of the episode, all the guest cast is pretty much equal parts because they're all suspects and they're all in every scene. Yeah. But towards the end of the episode, when we actually find out what happened and who's doing what, it more becomes your episode as like the main guest star because of just that last scene between you and Raymond.
Yes.
There was a lot going on in there, like emotion, and you had to communicate why and you were doing it and your mental state. And I think you did a really great job in the episode. What was that? Did that add to the level of difficulty, or from your experience, is it just like another day at work?
I mean, I think that's one of the reasons it's fun to do. I mean, getting to do a meaty scene is, it can be difficult. Certainly, you're trying to perform well. Robert Klein, the famous comedian, said, "Everyone can be funny. Can you be funny at 8:00 on a Saturday?" Right? Like, you have to be able to turn these things on. That's just part of the job. So it's certainly challenging to muster up wanting to kill a room full of people, and what is your reason, and sort of building up why you would do something like that. That's sort of the work that goes into it beforehand. The only time that becomes really challenging is if you're trying to do a scene like that with someone who's not present with you or giving you something back, and luckily that's not the case. Ray is such an amazing scene partner that it ends up being kind of not easy, but it's that's what we love to do. Acting's not about winning. It's about allowing yourself to lose on screen and be affected. And so when you're given permission, or you give yourself permission to do that, that's what acting is at its best, I think. So yeah, it's certainly challenging, and it's a long day, and there's a lot of angles, and that stuff can get tiring emotionally, but that's what you train for. That's what you you got to get enough sleep and not eat too much sugar. And that's the job, is you have to be emotionally fit, basically. So yeah, it's challenging, but it's really, really, I mean, that's the good stuff. That's what makes it worthwhile.
Did you know you had that good stuff coming up when you auditioned, or were you just given the part as, hey, nerdy scientist guy, that's it, run with it? And
no, I think one of the audition scenes was the turn at the end, or at least part of it. So I did know that it was me, which is a fun thing to play throughout the episode, because I think that's why you cast someone like me. I kind of look like nothing bad has ever happened to me, you put the glasses on and you go like, this guy, he can do anything bad. So that's kind of the fun part, is trying to bury that, but also have little red herrings here and there, and foreshadowing that doesn't tip the scale, but also is something that maybe if you go back and watch, you go, oh, okay, I see that moment there. I see what he was doing. So yeah, it's a fun little puzzle to kind of put together.
Yeah, I was watching this episode with my daughter Serenity, and she was very adamant that it wasn't your character. So she wanted me to tell you did a great job, and
yay!
Pulled her. Does it add another level to playing the character when you're the one who did it, and you have to act like you didn't do it, but act like at the same time you did it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's kind of that's the fun challenge. Like, I often think of you've seen the movie The Departed. The Leonardo DiCaprio role in that movie is very interesting, because he has to do a lot of things. He has to be nervous that he's undercover in the mob. We have to, as the audience, have to know he's nervous, but we also have to believe that they don't know he's nervous, right? Because he's pulling it off. So it's a very interesting balancing act of trying to, in the best case scenario, Serenity doesn't think it's me, but if she goes back and watches it again, she can go, oh, right, of course it's him. That's, I don't know if we did that. We'll see. But like, that sort of best case scenarios, you're trying to drop things that maybe on second viewing, or when the turn is revealed, your brain goes, oh, right, of course. Right. That's the sort of the fine line you're trying to walk. But that's a tricky thing to do. But I think the way that the episode was constructed was so well done that you kind of never get quite enough time with people to really see what's going on with them. I mean, I was certainly playing or experiencing moments of stress that I might be found out, but you're also covering them up, and then it's up to the editors and the director to put it together in a way that is, it's like a great murder mystery. It's that's kind of the fun of it. But we're certainly trying for that. So thank you, Serenity. That makes me very happy that she never suspected me.
Not a bit. She really loved the episode. My final silly question is, did you get to keep the pen?
I didn't keep the pen, but I did keep my ID badge, which I kept. Well, I kept partly because the prop master just gave it to me. He was like, everyone wants something like this. And the reason I wanted it is because my character name, Eugene Wagner. Wagner is the last name of every character I've played in Martin's shows. So in the LA Complex, I was Nick Wagner, and in Blind Spot, I was David Wagner. And so that was a nice little thing for us, named after a friend of ours, and something that one of the things Martin likes to put in his shows, these kind of fun little Easter eggs. And so that was a real thrill for us. I also always wear glasses in his shows. So, but I didn't keep the pen, unfortunately, but I did keep the ID badge. I've got that just over yonder.
Very cool.
Nice. Yeah. Nice. Very cool. Do you have any upcoming projects you can tell us about?
Yeah, I am. One I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about yet. The other is I produced and starred in a movie that I made with a close friend of mine, Sebastian Piggott. It's a movie called Bring It All Back Home. We just finished editing it, and we're sort of submitting to festivals. It's our first foray into making things on our own. And so we're so proud of it. It's some of the best work I've ever done, certainly. And it's a really, really personal film. So we're hoping to get that into as many festivals and in front of as many people as possible. It's, independent film. It's difficult. And then I have, like I said, I have something I'm not sure if I'm allowed to announce that I'm a part of coming up. I believe it'll come out maybe in the spring or the summer. I'm not sure. They don't tell me anything.
Okay, IMDb has.
We'll be on the lookout for
IMDb
that.
has something called Hindsight listed for you.
Oh yes, so, that was a really cool thing I did. It's a podcast, like a scripted podcast. That's very, very cool. It's we did it all on a stage, so everything was mic'd, and we got to do it sort of like a play, as opposed to sitting in front of a lectern and talking. We did it all like and it's sort of it involves it involves magic and mystery, and I don't want to say too much about it, but it's a really, really cool project that I'm excited to hear it myself. I know that they're working on it. And it's a very cool. It's going to be a very cool project. So yeah, look out for that. Look out for Hindsight and Bring It All Back Home, which I'm so stoked about.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I saw the poster for Bring It All Back Home, and it has an interesting tagline. So I'm intrigued.
Yes, yeah. It's a line from the movie that will make more sense when you see the movie.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll definitely check that out.
Oh, awesome.
And finally, can you tell me like what your takeaway is from working on Quantum Leap, and just the whole process of filming it and just being a part of now another genre universe, Quantum Leap?
Yeah, I mean, I think like anything, I used to feel this way about Arrow. It's very cool to be a part of a cultural touchstone, and in the case of Quantum Leap, this is a show that deals in identity and understanding other people's identity. And that's something that's really prescient right now and something that's really important. And so to have a show that's handling that intelligently and gracefully, but also in a fun way, in an entertaining way, it's just a real honor to just be a part of it. I'm such a fan of film and TV and that stuff. So to get to be a part of it that's one of the reasons I do this. We don't do it to be in a vacuum. I like that people see it, that you guys saw it, that people watch it, they have opinions, good or bad, it doesn't really matter. And so to be a part of a show that I think is doing something not only entertaining, but important to for once a week to think about what would it be like to be in someone else's shoes. That's something pretty important, I think, right now. So I'm really honored.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you guys. Yeah.
Wow, that was so cool. Thank you, Joe, for being on the show. Yeah. So yeah, he was fun, huh?
Yeah. He's just
he's all smiles, that guy.
Yes, I know, right? He seems so happy to be talking to us, and he's been around a long time. I mean, he's older than he looks, and has been in the business since he was very young. So, he had a lot of cool memories.
Yeah, that's cool. He gets to play the villain with the heart of gold, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good role. Another good thing. Thank you, Joe, again, for being on the show. We really appreciate it. And we have some feedback, some listener feedback. So This is a Facebook comment that I thought Allison would especially like. It's from Andrew Schumacher, who's one of our top commenters on Facebook. So, Andrew, here's your feedback. Here it is. It's on the show. I'm going to start. I work for an FFRDC, federally funded research and development center, and almost all of our sponsors are DoD. 95% of that is Navy funded. I know it doesn't apply to 98% of the folks out there, but it is so immersion breaking when they have a scientific project using law enforcement authorities or intel or any other authority they don't have all meshed together at a scientific research project.
We have our own security force, but they're basically parking enforcement and building security. Perhaps they're located on a military installation. Even then, the scientist wouldn't be running around chasing people down and locking them in conference rooms to interrogate them. Haha, laughing, crying emoji.
US Title 10, Military, Title 50, Intelligence Gathering, and Title 30, Law Enforcement, I think, is so closely adhered to within the military and three-letter agencies. There are some overlaps with military embedded agencies, but yeah, hey, I can be your Navy and Intel consultant.
I guess we need one. The show needs one.
Yes.
And he finishes up by writing, another tenuous Scrubs connection via Jamie Jackson. Love it. This was a great Leap episode, aside from the continuously cringeworthy project stuff. Well, thank you, Andrew. It's funny you talk about immersion breaking because we were just talking about in Paging Dr. Song how I don't watch medical dramas in my house because my wife's a nurse. I've mentioned on the show before when I see stuff about journalism and people in news, I can't get into it. So I imagine every time they go back to the project, your head is spinning. So if you out there would like to be like Andrew, there are many ways that you can get in touch with us here at the Quantum Leap Podcast. You can drop us a line at P.O. Box 542, Bayport, New York, 11705. You can get us on the phone at 707-847-6682. You can email us at quantumleappodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/quantumleappodcast. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at quantumleappod. And you can watch our YouTube channel at youtube.com/the We are going to be featuring that interview with Joe and the after show. So those should be up on the YouTube channel right now. When you're done listening to this, head over there and watch those because Albie's doing a great job over there. And you get to see how handsome Joe is without those horn rim glasses. So, and that's not the only thing on YouTube, right? There's much bigger news on YouTube to come. Tell us where you're going to be.
Yeah, speaking of handsome people with glasses, thank you. I'm going to be chatting with fan Damon Sugamelli, who he's been running fan reaction videos for the series so far on his channel at Damon Sugamelli 645. So I'm going to be joining him later this week to talk about this episode. Which will be really fun.
Oh, that's great. So cool. And it's going to be, does he do like regular episode reaction videos? Is that what this is?
Yeah, but it's usually just him and his wife, but because of the unique nature of this leap, he's got quite a unique plan for this episode, which is why he's pulled me and a few other people in.
I think I see some looping, but
yes.
It remains to be seen.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's great. So I can't wait to watch it. So yeah, can you say that address one more time? Is it youtube.com?
youtube.com/at Damon Sugamelli 645.
And everybody look at our socials. We'll be promoting that on our socials when it comes out. Facebook, Insta, Twitter, the whole nine. All right. So, hey, good on you, Matt.
Yeah.
And, before I forget, always be plugging. You can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/The Quantum Leap Podcast. Just remember, we may use your responses on an upcoming episode of The Quantum Leap Podcast. And speaking of upcoming episodes, Matt, tell us what's next.
Well, next week we're back with Let Them Play. And the synopsis for that is Ben finds himself in 2012 in the midst of the Mendez family as they help their transgender daughter who dreams of playing on her high school basketball team. Magic and Jen discover another piece of the puzzle of why Ben leapt in the first place.
Another piece of the puzzle's coming.
Yeah. Yeah, it also sounds like we've got some nice small family level stuff, not big military dramas, but
no, it seems like another issues-oriented Leap, which
Yes.
is getting back to the DNA of Quantum Leap. And I'm sorry, guys, there was no Leap out in this one to drop in as a preview,
No.
so we're waiting just as much as you. Although by the time this airs, I'm sure there'll be some kind of promo over the closing credits that we're not privy to yet. So you'll have more of an idea than we do right now as we're recording this. But I am looking forward to seeing that one. I want to see how they tackle this topic because it's certainly going to be, I think, kind of a lightning rod for the show, and we'll probably get a lot of attention. So until that time, I have been Christopher DeFilippis.
I've been Allison Pregler.
And I've been Matt Dale.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Quantum Leap podcast, hosted by Allison, Matt, and Chris, with voice talent and contributions from Hayden McQueenie and Zoe Dean. To support the show, please go to patreon.com/Quantum Leap podcast. The executive producer of the Quantum Leap podcast is Albert Burge. Christopher DeFilippis and Hayden McQueenie are the co-executive producers. Special thanks to our producers, Chris, aka Brackmang, Mike Covert, Joshua Burwald, Jeff Kiska, Craig Riedler, Cosplay Dad, Charles Allen Gossard, and Morgan Felden. The thoughts expressed on this podcast are those of the individual and do not necessarily represent those of the Quantum Leap podcast, its partners, or affiliates. The Quantum Leap universe and all it contains is the property of Belisarius Productions and Universal Television. The Quantum Leap podcast is not affiliated with Belisarius Productions or Universal Television, and no copyright infringement is intended. The Quantum Leap podcast is a Barren Space production.
Leap, die, repeat. Leap, die, repeat. Leap, die, repeat. Leap, die, repeat. Leap, die, repeat.